What if I told you that right now, somewhere in Africa, there's a technology that could completely flip everything we know about energy on its head? And what if I told you that the same people who are supposed to encourage innovation are actively trying to shut it down? Stay with me here, because what you're about to discover might just change the way you think about Africa, about innovation, and about who really controls the future of our planet. You see, there's this pattern throughout history, a pattern so predictable that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Someone comes up with an idea that challenges what everyone thinks is possible. The experts laugh. The institutions reject it. The media mocks it. And then, quietly, the world changes forever. Let me paint you a picture. It's the early 1900s, and two bicycle mechanics from Ohio are telling people they can build a machine that will let humans soar through the sky like birds. The response? The New York Times literally published that it would take anywhere from 1 to 10 million years before humans could achieve powered flight. Not decades, not centuries, millions of years. The Wright brothers proved them wrong in just a few months. Or how about this? A brilliant but eccentric Serbian inventor starts talking about sending power through the air without wires. People called him crazy. They said Nikola Tesla was living in a fantasy world. Fast forward to today, and we're charging our phones wirelessly, powering our electric toothbrushes without plugging them in, and building entire smart homes based on the very principles Tesla described. Here's another one. When electric vehicles first appeared on the scene, oil companies and car manufacturers didn't just ignore them, they actively ridiculed them. Nobody's laughing now as we watch the entire automotive industry pivot toward electric power. So why am I telling you all this? Because right now, in our time, there's another inventor being dismissed, mocked, and blocked by the very institutions that are supposed to foster innovation. And this time, it's happening to an African. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if the very fact that they are trying so hard to shut this down is actually proof that it works? What if the rejection isn't because the technology is fake, but because it's real, and it threatens to disrupt some of the most powerful industries on the planet? Now, before you think this is just another conspiracy theory video, let me be clear. I'm going to show you the actual technology, the actual inventor, and the actual responses from institutions. You can make up your own mind, but I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to be asking yourself some very uncomfortable questions about who controls innovation and why. Let's start with a place most people have never heard of: Harare, Zimbabwe. Specifically, a suburb called Kadoma. Picture a young boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sitting on the floor of his family's modest home, surrounded by the guts of a radio he just took apart. His parents are probably worried he's broken something valuable, but this kid isn't destroying the radio. He's trying to understand it. How does sound come through this box? Where does the power go? What if we could make it better? This boy's name is Sangolani Maxwell Chikumbutso. And unlike most kids who take things apart and can't put them back together, he not only reassembled that radio, he improved it. This wasn't a one-time thing. He became known in his neighborhood as the kid who could fix anything. Engines, electronics, machinery. If it was broken, he could make it work. Often better than before. Now, here's the thing about Sangolani. He didn't come from money. He didn't have access to fancy laboratories or prestigious universities. He didn't have professors with PhDs guiding his every step. What he had was curiosity, determination, and a mind that refused to accept limitations. While other kids his age were memorizing textbooks, Sangolani was experimenting. While they were following instructions, he was asking why those instructions existed in the first place. And somewhere in that process, somewhere between taking apart his 100th engine and rebuilding his 1000th circuit, he started to see something that nobody else was seeing. He started to notice patterns in energy, the way it moved, the way it transformed, the way it seemed to follow rules, but also the way those rules might not be as fixed as everyone thought. And he started to wonder, what if we're thinking about energy all wrong? What if there's a way to harness it that we've been missing because we're too busy following the old rules? So he started building. Not just tinkering, not just experimenting, but actually constructing devices based on theories that existed only in his head. His family thought he was obsessed. His friends probably thought he was wasting his time. But Sangolani kept building. And then he built something that would change everything. He called it a microsonic energy device. Now, I know that sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but stay with me, because what this thing does is absolutely wild. According to Sangolani and the people who've tested it, this device can generate power without burning fuel, without nuclear reactions, without solar panels or wind turbines. It pulls energy from something he describes as the natural energy field that exists all around us. I can already hear the skeptics. That's impossible. That violates the laws of thermodynamics. That breaks the first law of energy conservation. And you know what? That's exactly what the U.S. Patent Office said when Sangolani tried to patent his invention. They literally rejected it on the grounds that it violates the natural laws of physics and therefore cannot be industrially applicable. Think about that for a second. An office designed to protect new inventions rejected this one because it works too well. Because it does something that their textbooks say can't be done. They didn't say the device doesn't work. They didn't say the measurements were wrong. They said the laws of physics don't allow it. Therefore, we won't grant you a patent. Sangolani's response? Fine. If you won't recognize it legally, I'll keep it as a trade secret and just keep building. And build he did. He created an electric vehicle powered by this microsonic energy system. Not a hybrid that still needs gas. Not an electric car that needs to be plugged in for hours. A car that generates its own power while it runs. And here's the kicker. This vehicle produces so much excess energy that when you park it in your garage, you can plug your house into it and power your entire home. 15 kilowatts of continuous power. Enough to run lights, appliances, air conditioning, everything. Imagine driving home from work, parking your car, and instead of worrying about your electricity bill, your car is now powering your refrigerator, your TV, your computer. The vehicle becomes a mobile power station. You're not just saving money on gas, you're potentially eliminating your electricity bill entirely. But it doesn't stop there. He built a motorcycle version. He built a generator that can produce 0.5 megawatt of power. To put that in perspective, that's enough energy to power about 300 average homes simultaneously. From one machine. No fuel, no emissions, no massive infrastructure. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds too good to be true. If this technology really works, why isn't it everywhere? Why aren't we hearing about this on the news? Why hasn't some big company bought the technology and rolled it out worldwide? And that's exactly the right question to ask. But maybe the answer isn't what you think. See, there's a difference between something being impossible and something being inconvenient. Throughout history, innovations that threaten existing power structures don't fail because they don't work. They fail because they work too well. They threaten too many interests. They challenge too many assumptions. Think about the oil industry. We're talking about trillions of dollars in infrastructure, influence, and control. Think about the utility companies that make money every single month from every single household. Think about the geopolitical power that comes from controlling energy resources. Now imagine all of that becoming obsolete overnight. Would those interests welcome this technology with open arms? Or would they do everything in their power to suppress it, discredit it, and make sure it never sees the light of day? I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm saying there's a conflict of interest so massive that it shapes what gets funded, what gets published, what gets taught in schools, and what gets approved by patent offices. Independent researchers have actually gone to Zimbabwe to test these devices. People with no financial stake in the outcome, people with scientific backgrounds, people who went in skeptical. And time after time, they've come back saying the measurements are real. The energy output exceeds the input. Something is happening that current mainstream physics doesn't fully explain. Does that mean the laws of physics are wrong? Not necessarily. It might mean our understanding of those laws is incomplete. After all, Newtonian physics worked perfectly fine until we discovered quantum mechanics. Einstein's relativity seemed to contradict Newton, but really, it just revealed a deeper layer of how the universe works. Maybe what Sangolani has stumbled onto isn't breaking the rules. Maybe he's discovered a rule we didn't know existed. Maybe there are forms of energy, ways of harnessing natural forces that our current scientific paradigm hasn't caught up with yet. And here's where this story becomes about so much more than one inventor or one device. This is about Africa's place in the global innovation landscape. For centuries, Africa has been positioned as the recipient of technology, not the creator. We import cars, we don't manufacture them. We buy phones, we don't design them. We consume energy solutions developed elsewhere. We don't pioneer new ones. That's the narrative that's been sold to the world and, tragically, often sold to Africans themselves. But that narrative is a lie, and it's always been a lie. Let me give you some facts that might blow your mind. Mathematics, the foundation of all modern science and technology, has roots in Africa going back more than 20,000 years. There's an artifact called the Ishango bone, discovered in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that shows complex mathematical calculations from that era. 20,000 years ago, while much of the world was just figuring out basic survival, Africans were doing mathematics. Surgery. Ancient Egyptian physicians were performing complex surgical procedures more than 2,500 years ago. We have documented evidence of brain surgery, eye surgery, and dental procedures that wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. And if you want something more recent, the first human heart transplant, one of the most complicated surgical procedures ever attempted, was successfully performed in South Africa in 1967 by Dr. Christian Barnard. African innovation isn't new. What's new is the attempt to make the world and Africans themselves forget this legacy. But something is shifting. All across the continent, you're seeing innovation that doesn't wait for approval from Western institutions. Kenya pioneered mobile banking with M-Pesa, creating a financial revolution that the rest of the world is now trying to copy. Rwanda is using drone technology to deliver medical supplies to remote areas, leapfrogging infrastructure challenges that would have taken decades to solve the old way. Africa isn't waiting for permission anymore. And that's what makes Sangolani's story so important. He's not asking for validation from institutions that have historically gate-kept innovation. He's building, testing, and proving his concepts in the real world. Now let's get real about what's at stake here. Energy poverty affects hundreds of millions of people across Africa and billions worldwide. Entire communities go without electricity, not because the technology doesn't exist, but because the infrastructure is too expensive and the existing energy model makes it unprofitable to serve them. Imagine if that equation changed completely. Imagine if energy generation didn't require massive power plants, extensive distribution networks, and ongoing fuel supplies. Imagine if a village could have its own power source, independent and sustainable, for the cost of a single generator that never needs refueling. That's not just an economic shift. That's a redistribution of power in the most literal sense. Energy independence means educational opportunities. It means medical facilities that can operate reliably. It means businesses that can function. It means communication networks that can reach everyone. And on a larger scale, imagine nations that don't have to import fuel, don't have to negotiate with oil-producing countries, don't have to build vulnerable infrastructure that can be targeted or controlled. Imagine the geopolitical landscape when energy abundance is available to everyone. Some people benefit from the current system. Some people profit from scarcity, from dependency, from control. And those people have every incentive to make sure technologies like Sangolani's never gain traction. So, when the patent office rejects his application, when mainstream media ignores his demonstrations, when so-called experts dismiss his work without actually examining it. You have to ask yourself, are they protecting science or are they protecting interests? I want to be clear about something. I'm not asking you to blindly believe that this technology works exactly as described. Healthy skepticism is good. Demanding evidence is good. Testing claims rigorously is how science should work. What I am asking you to question is why that rigorous testing isn't happening. Why aren't major universities sending research teams? Why aren't science journalists investigating? Why is the response dismissal rather than curiosity? Throughout history, every major breakthrough faced this same wall of resistance. Not because the breakthrough was fake, but because it threatened the status quo. The people who benefit from how things are will always find reasons why things can't change. When the telephone was invented, the head of Western Union said it was nothing more than a toy with no practical value. When radio was developed, experts said it had no future. When the Internet was emerging, major tech companies completely missed its significance because it didn't fit their existing business models. The pattern is always the same. Dismiss, ridicule, ignore, and hope it goes away. And when it doesn't go away, when it keeps working and gaining attention, then comes the next phase. Co-opt it, control it, or crush it. So where does Sangolani's invention fit in this timeline? Right now, it's in the dismiss and ridicule phase. The mainstream institutions are pretending it doesn't exist or claiming it's impossible without investigation. But the technology keeps working. The demonstrations keep happening. Independent observers keep confirming the measurements, which means we might be approaching the next phase. And that's when things get really interesting and potentially really dangerous for the inventor. There's something profoundly inspiring about someone who looks at the entire weight of conventional wisdom, the entire authority of established institutions, and says, I'm going to prove you wrong. Not with arguments, not with credentials, but by building something that works. That's what Sangolani represents. Not just a potential technological breakthrough, but a challenge to the idea that innovation flows in only one direction, from the developed world to the developing world, from the educated elite to everyone else. He represents the idea that genius can emerge anywhere, that solutions can come from unexpected places, and that the next great leap forward for humanity might not come from a Silicon Valley lab or a European research institute, but from a workshop in Zimbabwe. And that idea, more than any specific technology, is what threatens the existing order. Because if innovation can come from anywhere, if solutions can emerge from people who didn't follow the prescribed path, if the gatekeepers aren't necessary, then what happens to their power? This is why your attention to stories like this matters. Not because I'm asking you to become an evangelist for one specific technology, but because how we respond to unconventional innovation shapes what kind of future we get. If we automatically dismiss anything that challenges established scientific understanding, we guarantee that our knowledge stays frozen. If we only take seriously the inventions that come from approved sources, we ensure that those sources maintain their monopoly on progress. But if we stay curious, if we demand investigation rather than dismissal, if we support the right of innovators everywhere to challenge conventions and prove their concepts, then we open the door to breakthroughs we can't even imagine yet. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Whether Sangolani's specific device becomes the energy solution that changes the world, or whether it's a stepping stone to something even better, the principle remains the same. Africa is not just a consumer of technology. Africans are innovators, inventors, and pioneers who deserve the same respect, resources, and recognition as innovators anywhere else. The next Tesla might be working in a garage in Lagos. The next Wright brothers might be experimenting in Nairobi. The next Einstein might be puzzling over equations in Accra. And if we're not paying attention, if we're not supporting, if we're not amplifying those voices, we're not just doing a disservice to Africa, we're robbing humanity of solutions we desperately need. Every time you share a story like this, every time you question why an innovation is being dismissed, rather than investigated every time you challenge the narrative that innovation only comes from certain places or certain people, you're helping to break down the barriers that have held back human progress. This isn't about charity. This isn't about feeling good. This is about recognizing where the next breakthroughs are actually happening and making sure they get the support they need to flourish. So I'm going to ask you to do something right now. If this story made you think, if it challenged your assumptions, if it made you curious about what else might be happening in Africa that the mainstream media isn't covering, hit that like button. Not for me, but as a signal that you want to see more content like this, that you're interested in innovation regardless of where it comes from. And if you want to be part of a community that celebrates African innovation, that questions conventional wisdom, and that believes the future belongs to those bold enough to challenge the impossible, subscribe to this channel. Because I'm going to keep bringing you stories that matter, stories that inspire, and stories that might just change how you see the world. Remember, every single technology that now seems normal, every convenience you take for granted, every scientific principle you learned in school, all of it was once considered impossible by the experts of that time. The airplane, impossible. Wireless communication, impossible. Space travel, impossible. The internet, impractical. Electric vehicles, a fantasy. Until someone who didn't care about the consensus decided to prove everyone wrong. Sangolani Maxwell Chikumbutso might be right or he might be wrong, but he deserves the same opportunity to prove his concept that every other inventor has had. And Africa deserves to be taken seriously as a source of world-changing innovation. The future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create. And right now, we get to choose whether that future is created by the same old voices saying the same old things, or whether we open our minds to possibilities we haven't considered, from places we've been told to ignore. Stay curious, stay bold, stay open to the impossible. Because history shows us, again and again, that the impossible is just the not yet proven. And somewhere, right now, someone is working on proving it. This is your reminder that innovation doesn't need permission, breakthroughs don't need credentials, and the future doesn't have to look like the past. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. And thank you for being a part of the conversation that might just change everything. Now go share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the revolution won't be televised, but it might just be YouTubed. See you in the next one.